Welcome back to another episode of the Westerns for Life podcast with Dan from Dan's Movie Cave, Carlos from Eastwood for Life fan, and Jeff, 101 Bronson.
Hi there, guys. So we are back again for another Westerns for Life podcast episode, and it's episode 2. The first episode, obviously, we chose The Magnificent Seven, which was Jeff's choice. This time around, it's my choice, and for this review, I've chosen the Sergio Corbucci spaghetti western from 1968. Starring Franco Nero, The Mercenary. So this is a Sergio Corbucci spaghetti western, and the second out of 3 collaboration with Franco Nero. He did make another spaghetti western with Corbucci in 1970 with Companeros. But The Mercenary is a Mexican Revolution spaghetti western, sometimes also known as a Zapata Western.
The plot.
Basically, Franco Nero, he plays a hired mercenary, a Polish mercenary by the name of Sergei Kalowski. And great shot there. And basically, he is a man for hire and a Mexican peasant played by Tony Musante. And yeah, there is Tony Musante.
In his clown costume.
and basically, he hires Kalowski's services to making him a revolutionary leader for Mexico. And in the process, he is a wanted man because he does take over a mine owned by Colonel Garcia, played by Eduardo Fajardo. And then, as with most spaghetti westerns, you get double crossings, and Masante's character becomes a wanted man across Mexico and the American border.
The characters.
So, guys, mainly the first lead is Franco Nero, who plays Sergei Kalowski. What do you guys think of the character played by Franco Nero in this movie? Jeff?
Yeah, so you want to go on this, Dan, or me? Yeah, Franco Nero. I think, Franco Nero is awesome, and he's been in quite a few spaghetti westerns, as you mentioned. He did 3 with this director, Sergio Corbucci. Obviously, the most famous one is Django from 1966, which was 2 years before this. But I think this one is, just as well as, also adds as one of his counts, I should say, also counts as one of his, great roles in spaghetti westerns as Sergei Kowalski, the Polak. And is also notable for this one as opposed to Django. In the English dub, it's actually this time Franco Nero doing his own voice in this one, as opposed to Django where he was dubbed by somebody else. And I think they should redo Django with his voice, because I think his voice is absolutely wonderful. I think it works very well for the characters that he plays. He also dubs himself in Companeros as well. And I think the voice works very well. I think his English is actually, pretty good. And I actually think, as a lead, reminiscent slightly of Clint Eastwood in certain films, especially in Django, where they sort of made him up to be a Clint Eastwood sort of, I guess, double gang or lookalike, whatever. Also, a lot of people would say he looks a lot like Terence Hill, but there's a story to that, because Terence Hill was actually hired because he looked so much like Franco Nero. But no, Franco Nero, I think, is a fantastic lead in the spaghetti westerns. He does a great job in this film. And he's certainly one of my favorite sort of movie cowboys, outlaws. So I love Franco Nero. What do you think of Franco Nero then?
Yeah, I do like Franco Nero. This particular role with him in, as I was saying beforehand, Jeff, I wasn't that taken by this film originally. I think a lot of that was to do with Franco Nero's character being very different to Django, because in this film he plays a real greedy, selfish arsehole, to be honest.
Mm.
Which the character arc develops throughout towards the end. But rewatching this morning before this podcast, I grew to really like the character and appreciate his pristine kind of look, the way he strategically plans out everything. He's not just one step, he's several steps ahead of everyone else. And, he looks cool. There's some great shots of him. Just one of them characters that you look at and think is very effortless. On screen. He doesn't do a lot, does he? But he's the mastermind, and he's grown on me. That's kind of what I think of Nero, and I will sort of acknowledge what you said, Jeff, about his voice, because I absolutely really appreciated his voice. I wasn't sure originally if it was him, but looking it up today, I thought, you know what, that just works so much better. His English, he's just got a real nice, classy flow to it. So that's what I think of him as the Polak.
Yeah, I mean, he's a completely different character to what he is on Django. Obviously,
Yeah, totally.
with that headline there, you can tell what his actions are. He's just a man for hire. And you're right, Dan, he is a complete bastard and arsehole in this, because he's in it for greed. And obviously, when he's at the services of Paco Ramon's gang, he kind of abuses it, like he's getting well overpaid and he's being well treated. He wants all the luxuries to go with it, while the gang is kind of suffering. But what did you make of the actual look? Because he's got a completely different look from the Django character to this Polish mercenary, because it's a completely different look in how he's a lot more smarter looking. He's wearing a beige duster, and you'd have to look extra hard to realise it's the same actor. So what did you think of the look?
The look, as we bring up a picture of him, as you can see there in the look, he has the sort of weird facial hair. I don't know what sort of style of mustache / beard, whatever that is, but it's sort of weird ass longer sideburns there. Obviously, the one thing you can always tell, with Franco Nero is his, piercing blue eyes. You can always tell it's him by the beautiful blue eyes there. Other than that, as I remove the picture, he's dressed more sharply, more. He has a tie there, and like I said, the sort of the beige white sort of dustery thingy, cape thingy, I guess. I thought the styling for him worked well. Definitely with the sort of character he plays in this one. Again, it's been mentioned, he's a bit more of a greedy bastard. He's more of a Tarantino character, which I know we're gonna get into Tarantino and taking influence from these films later on. But he's a bit of a Tarantino character. He wouldn't be out of place in a Hateful Eight or Django Unchained, for example. This character, because he's written that way, to sort of be a bastard. Obviously, he has a bit of a character development later on in the film, but I think the styling absolutely works for him. I actually like that it's a bit more of a unique look for the sort of the gunslinger, or in this case, the titular mercenary. So Dan?
Yeah. It took me a while to get used to originally, because I do prefer in spaghetti western the grittier, rough, unshaven type of cowboy, let's say, like an Eastwood and Nero and Django. But let's say, rewatching it, I thought he looked the part. I mean, there were certain shots of him that was just reminding me of Viggo Mortensen, with that kind of almost grown up handlebar beard. Sorry. I thought it looked a bit different to kind of what I'm used to at that point in time.
Yeah, I mean, I thought the character worked well, and he was cooler in a kind of more light-hearted way, because there are some comedic moments in this movie as well as violent moments. Obviously, him lighting his cigar on a prostitute's bust.
The matches. Yeah,
a dead man hanging off his boots was a fairly comedic sort of moment, which I don't think has kind of been used in spaghetti westerns at the time, and I thought there was nice touches to his kind of cool character. So I enjoyed it because it was another sort of switch in the characters that he's played previously into a few of those spaghetti westerns that he'd done before this movie. Then obviously the second lead, Tony Masanti, who actually I didn't realise he was an American actor, because he does look pretty sort of European or Mexican, and he plays.
Yeah, the name sounds Italian. Yeah.
Yeah, I thought he was an Italian actor. Obviously, the only other sort of major role that I've seen him in a movie is The Bird with the Crystal Plumage, where he's the lead role in that. Yeah. So I assumed he was an Italian actor. But Masanti plays Paco Roman, who's kind of a Mexican peasant who's actually working in this mine. Then he eventually takes over the mine, much to the annoyance of Colonel Garcia, played by Eduardo Fajardo. But this being Masanti's only spaghetti western, and I know this movie didn't perform well in Europe, because the role that Masanti plays is very similar to what Thomas Milian would have played. And I thought he'd done a great job in this movie, because I mean his character kind of changes throughout, because he becomes he's a Mexican peasant and a bit of a thief, but then all of a sudden he wants to become a kind of Mexican revolution leader sort of halfway through the movie. So what did you guys think of his performance in this movie, Jeff?
So I did like Tony Masanti in this. We're going to get to this as well, but obviously Compañeros, you had Thomas Milian in a similar sort of role, which might as well mention this now. Compañeros, which came out in 1970, was sort of a little bit of a remake of this film, sort of a retelling of this film with a lot of similarities. I do prefer Thomas Milian in this sort of role, to be fair. But I thought Tony Masanti, he did a good job in it as Paco Roman. That was the name, wasn't it? Yeah. As Paco. Obviously, later on we showed a picture where he is dressed up as the clown, almost being unrecognizable. But even there, I think other actors they might have made it look silly, wearing that clown costume and makeup. But with him, I think he pulled it off well. I do like the character arc for him as well, where at first he's not really all for the revolution, sort of midway after he meets the female character of the piece, where he sort of has a change of heart and he's fighting for the cause and stuff. And obviously, him being sort of suckered and played and tricked by the Polak throughout the film, I think that makes for some comedic moments in the film, some really good comedic moments. Obviously, like the scene springs to mind where he's trying to work the Gatling gun, he doesn't know how to do it, and he has to ask Franco Nero to put it together for him. Overall, I like Tony Masanti. Like yourself, I've only seen the Bird with Crystal Plumage as another film with him. I think he did a good job there as well. I would definitely like to see some more of his films if they're available. I think he's a pretty solid actor. So
he's actually my favourite character in the film. I find him the most interesting. I think he's got the strongest character arc. Do kind of like it how it starts with him and kind of ends with him. It's kind of, I remember watching it for the first time thinking, where's this going? With all the twists and turns. I'm glad you brought up about the comparison to Thomas Milian, because when '88 released this film right here. This was kind of my first real dive in past the Dollars and Once Upon a Time in the West films, and I've always really liked Tony Mazzanti. I've got to say, I did think when I originally first watched it, I thought people was calling him Paco Rabanne. It took me a while to get the hang of his name.
Thought,
yeah, but I just love his look. I love it how he's got, he's starting off in almost kind of sandals, and then he's got one boot on he's stolen from the army and one shoe. He's just a right scruff pot, but I think he's really likeable. But brilliant job by Tony Mazzanti is what I think of him.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, I mean, the movie, even though Franco Nero is the star power and his name is on top of the main lead, it is kind of Tony Mazzanti's character, Paco's story as the movie goes along, which makes the movie his journey from becoming a peasant to this Mexican revolutionary leader, because he likes the idea of kind of saving Mexico and sort of being for the people. So I thought he'd done a really amazing job in his only spaghetti western. I would have liked to see more. Has got a very similar look to Thomas Milian, and I thought he'd done a great job. The next character I want to bring up is Jack Palance, who plays kind of like the camp, mercenary. So he becomes involved in the story because at first he's after this load of silver that's supposedly supposed to be in this mine, but then obviously he gets embarrassed by Paco and his gang, so he becomes it kind of like his mission that he wants to go after him. He goes by the name of Curly. Funny enough, and funny enough, Jack Palance, many years later in 1991, after he'd been nominated, I think twice before for Best Supporting Actor, he got the Best Supporting Actor award in City Slickers with Billy Crystal, playing a character by the name of Curly.
Curly as well,
a great sort of achievement, and probably reference to the character he played in The Mercenary. So, guys, what did you think of Jack Palance, Jeff?
Oh, absolutely love him. Absolutely adore and love Jack Palance in this film, and also he would turn up as well in Company Hours a few years later. But I think Jack Palance is amazing. He's always been an excellent villain in films, and even the occasional good guy, he's played those roles as well. But mostly a villain. My earliest memory of Jack Palance is Tango and Cash, where he played the villain in that film with Stallone and Kurt Russell. So I've always seen him as the villain. He's always been a great, lovable villain. A villain you always sort of love to hate. I think he does a great job in this film, and I also love his little character touches. Like, he appears to be a bit on the religious side. Like, every time they sort of ride away on the horses, there's a crucifix or whatever. He always has to do a sort of crossing. So I did like that aspect of the character. Obviously, he's also the only character in this film that has a nude scene as well, which was very surprising to see. Like, he's pretty much fully naked in one scene, which I think we might talk about when we talk about some of the favorite scenes and stuff. But Jack Palance, great villain, great character as Curly, and like you said, it was very fitting that he would win the Oscar a few decades later for playing another character called Curly in a great film, City Slickers. So I love Jack Palance. I absolutely love him.
Yeah, I have to agree. I do like Jack Palance. The first film I see him in was The Professionals, one of my favourite westerns. In this film, my only disappointment was that he wasn't in it more, because I just think he's one of them that's just got the villainous face. You could watch a film with the sound off and think that's the villain right there. I mean, the religious side, I did like that kind of element to him, and without any spoilers, the kind of final scene, I actually thought he was going to do the old thing again, but he doesn't quite make it. But yeah, other than the dodgy perm, absolutely great character. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I've got to agree with what Dan says. For me, rewatching it just before this review, I realised it even more that he's not in it that much, which is a shame, really, because it's quite a major feat for an Italian director to get an actor like Jack Palance, considering all the movies that he'd done before going into this, to appear in a European Western. I think a lot of the scenes that he pops up in, he really does command the scene. Some great scenes with him. I actually like the look of him, even though he's got a dodgy perm. And I didn't realise his campiness until obviously when he got embarrassed and one of his men, Sebastian, got taken out. And then you realise that he's not a straight man or straight mercenary, which for that sort of period, they didn't sort of put it in your face. It's kind of, you pick up on it.
Yeah, it's more subtle. Subtle. Yeah.
It's quite subtle. And then I think, 2 years later, obviously with the Companeros movie, they made him a little bit more comedic in that one. And I thought his character in that was just as good. But yeah, Jack Palance is probably one of the big pluses to this movie. He brings a lot. It's like Dan says, you've only got to see that face and you know he's the villain. I don't think I've seen that many movies of him playing the good guy main lead. So Jack Palance I thought he was fantastic in The Mercenary. Then we go on to the last kind of supporting, one of the main supporting actors is the Colonel, played by Eduardo Fajardo, who plays Alfonso Garcia. He's made, he's appeared in many spaghetti westerns.
And a
Jeff,
frequent
what did you?
Corbucci collaborator.
Yeah, what did you think?
People that watch my channel, they know I dedicated a summer to Corbucci films, the review of Corbucci films. Eduardo Fajardo, he's one of the sort of actors that really appears in a lot of Corbucci films, and he was in Django, this one. I think he also was in Companeros, but that's only if you watch the full uncut.
Yeah, smaller part.
There. Eduardo Fajardo, I think there's only like one or two spaghetti westerns that I can think of at the moment where he plays a good guy. Other than that, he's always been the villain or supporting villain or whatever, sort of like a henchman, but usually a main villain. And he just has the face for it, just like Jack Palance. He just has the face for it, and he always makes for a very interesting villain. And he doesn't have quite as much to do in this one as Django, for example. But for what he does, I think, it's just always great as a spaghetti western fan to see him in one of these films. I think he does a pretty good job as the sort of secondary villain, because I do think that Jack Palance is sort of more of the main villain of the piece. But yeah, I think Eduardo Fajardo does a good job as well. So yeah, Dan.
Yeah, I was trying to think of how I could sum him up, kind of, because I've recognised him for a few films, and I looked at it and thought, and I'm looking back and thinking of this. The best way I can put it is I just think he's believable. He just seems to slot right into what he plays, especially as this. You just believe him in the role. And I can't say, I'm a massive fan, but if he's in a spaghetti western, you're going to say, he's going to make that part his own. He's going to make it better, a bit more believable. But other than that, I haven't really got a lot to say about him in this film, because he, other than being kind of the general, he wasn't in it a lot. Much like Jack Palance, the villains wasn't as present as you would think going into it. Even though when they're there, it makes for good entertainment. That's me on that.
Yeah, very true. Yeah, Eduardo Fiore is definitely one of those character actors in spaghetti westerns. So you might not know the name, at first,
Yeah.
but you definitely recognize the face whenever he pops up. So he's been in tons of spaghetti westerns.
Yeah, I mean, he's been in more spaghetti westerns than Franco Nero, and
Yeah,
him being, I mean, he was a Spanish actor who'd done a lot of westerns. Obviously, Django. A lot of people would have remembered him as Jackson in that one. He was also in
yeah,
Companeros in a lot smaller role. He would normally play the general or a Mexican bandit. He did
usually,
do
yeah,
a. He was
yeah,
in a Anthony Steffens spaghetti western named Gentleman Killer, where he played this Mexican bandit with this great big Mexican hat. That's
yeah,
probably one of my favorite roles that he was in. But like Dan says, he's very, he slots in perfectly. He doesn't look out of place, and he looks believable. Even his look. Um, some comedic moments. Obviously, he becomes more kind of gung ho that he wants to bring down Paco's revolutionary gang because after a few escapes, each time he comes back with his army, he comes back with
yeah,
a bigger set of men. The weaponry goes up a lot more because it kind of gets annoying for him and embarrassing for him
yeah.
that you know Franco Nero and Masante's character keeps escaping. But again,
Yeah, even to the point by the end, he gets a full, freaking airplane in there as well.
yeah, yeah, which was actually Jack Palance Curly's idea, where they get this plane that's trying to sort of gun them down and sort of tracking them down in one scene towards the end. But
Yeah,
yeah, Eduardo Fajardo, always a reliable sort of actor, very similar to Fernando Sancho. If you didn't have
yeah.
Eduardo Fajardo, you'd have Fernando Sancho as
It's
kind of like
always
the
one of the two.
general
Yeah,
or the villain. So those two actors, you add up all their spaghetti westerns, that they would have appeared in a lot in very
well,
similar
at
roles.
least 40 to 50 spaghetti westerns they got
Mm.
between them. Yeah,
And the last main character, actually a female
yeah.
character, played
Can segue into this
by
one. Yeah,
an, an Italian actress, Giovanni Reali, who plays Columbia, who she kind of becomes the helping hand for Paco's gang and kind of makes him switch to kind of becoming this Mexican sort of revolution leader. He kind of listens to her as the film goes along. And for once in a spaghetti western, we actually have a strong female character, which up until 1968, a lot of the women in spaghetti westerns were kind of beat up, whores, or they were kind of violently abused on camera. So going into this, seeing this character develop, I thought Giovanni Reali was something different in a Corbucci western, putting over a woman in quite a, in a quite important role. So, what did you think of her character played by Giovanni Reali? Hope I haven't butchered that name.
no, that's okay. I should add we should segue into this because we're going to give the women, especially strong characters in West, we're going to give them their own segment. So we call this segment "Women of the West."
Women of the West.
There we go. So yeah, just
And
to
that
pick up on what
and that is
you said there, Carlos,
her on
about
the bottom right, isn't it? We should tell
that
the
was her
viewers.
on the bottom right. Obviously, I had to add her as one of the women there in collage. Yeah, just to pick up on what you said there about Corbucci in this film, particularly having a strong female character. I think Corbucci is one of the sort of pioneers of strong female characters in westerns to begin with. Because even if you look at Django from '66, Maria. Yes, she was the war character in that one, but she still had a very strong presence and she still carried some weight into the story. I think Corbucci always had strong female characters in his movies. Django, The Mercenary, this one, Navajo Joe as well, and also in The Hellbenders is a very strong female character in that one as well. Yeah, Corbucci sort of always, and of course, The Great Silence, I think, is the pinnacle of that.
Yeah.
But yeah, Giovanna, with an A in, yeah, Giovanna Raleigh.
That's it. Yeah.
It's a difficult name. Giovanna Raleigh, I think she does a great job, and she's very good looking. She plays the scenes very well. She has a good part to play. She becomes sort of an influence on Tony Masanti's character. His actions are sort of influenced through her and through the relationship that they build together in the movie. I think it's a good part. I think she plays it wonderfully, and she's not bad to look at either, which doesn't hurt. So I absolutely love Giovanna Raleigh again. Next to the other main characters in this, like Franco Nero and Tony Masanti, and Jack Palance, she's a definite highlight of the film for me.
Yeah, think she's absolutely great in it. And for me, the first time of watching this, it was really refreshing, because I kind of wince when you get a Western of kind of this period, because you just think you're waiting for the woman to get a slap, get beaten. I don't like that kind of thing. So when I see her and I see kind of how prominent she was in this film, the voice of reason, for, as she looks, she's absolutely gorgeous. You don't see that coming from her, from when she's freed from the jail cell to kind of how important she's almost like the right hand person.
It sort of becomes that. Yeah.
For me, it was so refreshing, and I think she is fantastic in it. And the actual picture you've got there, you showed, is very iconic as well. I've got to add, I think she's absolutely brilliant. That's me on Giovanni Raleigh.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think watching this probably for the first time, when you actually see her, obviously she's very eye-catching. She's beautiful to look at. You sort of do think, is she just going to be eye candy that's just going to be placed in the background? But she is more than that as the movie goes along, which I think she comes into it in the last sort of 2/3 of the movie. I don't know a lot of her. I mean, I know she did appear in another Western with George Peppard, Cannon for Cordoba.
Oh yeah, that's right.
Which I know about, but do not have in my collection.
I've also seen her recently in a Giallo by Enzo Costello. I forgot the name of it. I think
Okay.
It was Cold Eyes of Fear. I think she was in that as well.
Okay, yeah. I probably might hunt that Western down, just because obviously, George Peppard, I like to see him in the Western, but obviously, I think it was actually filmed in Europe. So, I mean,
I think it's a Euro Western. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, she was an Italian actress, so I definitely will be looking out for that one, because she was definitely good to look at. So now we go on to the director, Sergio Corbucci.
So we're going behind the camera, and we have a little segment for that as well.
Behind the camera.
Yeah, Sergio Corbucci, probably known as the second Sergio in
the second Sergio, or the wrong Sergio as well, but he's been done by Burt Reynolds, famously.
Yeah, good point. Obviously, this movie is a lot different. Obviously, how Corbucci started, his earlier westerns were kind of more American type spaghetti westerns, but then all of a sudden he came out with the Django hit in '66, and that was all blood and guts and torture. But then he started, at this time in his career, he started to do the Mexican Revolution spaghetti westerns. So, guys, what did you think of Corbucci's work up until this movie and the quality of this movie?
Yeah, for
Jeff?
me, I think it's obvious because, yeah, like I mentioned, 2 years ago, I think at this point, I did a sort of whole tribute to Corbucci where I did review every single one of his spaghetti westerns, all 13 of them, if I remember that correct. I think he did 13 in total. Um, I absolutely love his body of work, and yeah, as many people always say, like there's Sergio Leone, and then there's Sergio Corbucci. He's definitely the second Sergio. Well, he's not the wrong Sergio, as Burt Reynolds called him, in my opinion. He's a great director, Sergio Corbucci. Other than his westerns, he did a lot of Italian comedies, which I'm not the biggest fan of. So it's really his western filmography that really makes it for me. But especially with this one, The Mercenary, is all of his previous ones, like his first two or three westerns, they were more American feeling. I think with Minnesota Clay, it's sort of started to be more Italian, even though that one still had a lot of American influences. But then '66 we had Navajo and Django, and the Hellbenders I think was '66 as well, or maybe that was '67, maybe that was in between. But with those films, he definitely made it more of his own and sort of differentiate. I think that's the word, himself from the other Sergio from Leone. But with this one, I feel he tried to be more Leone-esque, especially with some of the more epic shots and scenes in this film. Like, for example, we're going to talk about when we get to the final sort of showdown. That's about as Leone-esque as you're going to get with Gucci, especially with the Ennio Morricone music, which, again, we'll get into that in a second. But overall, his body of work, I think, is fantastic, especially his films right up until 1970. I feel like after that, his sort of last two or three spaghetti westerns that were a bit, sort of lesser films. I did like Sonny and Jet. That was one of his last films. I did like that film. But yeah, I love his spaghetti western catalog, I guess, and I think he's definitely one of the best directors of the genre, and he did a fantastic job with this film.
Yeah, for me, other than Leone, is always, I know I'm going to get of what I've seen, a very good spaghetti western. And I said to Jeff before we recorded this, I watched this film originally straight after Django, and I really wasn't a fan of it originally just because it was so different, a lot more tame. But rewatching it in recent years, I've come to really like it. And I kind of put it in a way as it's a western, a spaghetti western that puts a smile on my face, because it's got the bit of humour in it. So I love Paco. He makes me laugh. And yeah, I have to agree. Then the only kind of shots Corbucci went with, I actually thought lent to it. It was bigger budget, if I'm not mistaken, hence the aeroplane. I was watching it. It's a good kind of fan-made documentary on this 88 disc, sort of something that even if you have horses in a spaghetti western, sometimes you've got a budget, let alone a plane.
Yeah.
And yeah, I've got to say it's definitely possibly in my top three Corbucci films now, just because it's different. I mean, Django's going to still be better for me, but yeah, if you want something different, this one. I do like Corbucci's style with this.
That's a fair point, actually. I think I had Mercenary at my number 3 Corbucci film. I think that was my number 3 in my ranking, so it's a great one.
Yeah, I mean, for me, on Corbucci's westerns, I would say, obviously, if you love the Leone movies, obviously give Sergio Corbucci movies a shot. And I would say the peak of his career were the movies that he made from '66 to 1970. Even though a little bit after he made one or two good ones, he did kind of go more into that sort of comedy, family-orientated movies. But for me, where he made his name was kind of like the high violence in spaghetti westerns, where Leone was a little bit more artistic,
more stylish,
and he had the budget. Obviously, Corbucci didn't have that to compete with. He just ramped it up with the violence, becoming a little bit more controversial with other movies before. So, Corbucci is definitely a great director in this genre for me. And yeah, I mean, the work on this one is like Dan says. If you do have a plane in this, and you do have horses, it's considered high budget. Even trains as well, and a railway track and stuff that could sort of be considered one of the tropes in a more high budget spaghetti western than normal. So Corbucci definitely went kind of a little bit all out.
Even old vintage cars actually just came to me. Like very old car in this film as well.
Yeah, I mean, this movie was set during the Mexican Revolution.
The early 1900s. What is it? Yeah.
Yeah.
1910,
So
1911. Yeah.
You will see a few cars in this one, and also as Dan spotted a HMV sign in the background, which I never realised until I watched the finale scene. So, guys, obviously look out for that. So we go into the next section of this episode, and it will be favourite scenes in this movie. Jeff, what would be some?
Favorite scenes.
We gotta start it up, Carlos. So yeah, favorite scenes. So you want me to go on this one first, then, Carlos?
Yeah.
Well, yeah. The obvious, biggest one, the best scene for me. It's hands down the final showdown. Or it is a final showdown. There's stuff that happens afterwards, but for all intents and purposes, it's sort of the big showdown, the big climax. We're not going to spoil too much, but we're in a bull arena, and it's from the scene where Tony Masanti is dressed up as a rodeo clown, and he's got the clown makeup on and everything, and it's sort of similar to For a Few Dollars More, the duel, where it's a freeway, but it's not sort of we're free participants. We have one character as sort of the referee acting between the other two participants of the duel. The music in that, again, we're going to get to that, but awesome music. Like I said, that's about as Leone as you're going to get in this film, or pretty much in any of the Corbucci films, where that's really sort of Corbucci's version of a Leone showdown of a duel. So that's hands down my favorite scene. Again, not going to spoil too much. If you guys haven't seen it, watch it for this scene alone. This is absolutely worth watching the film for, as the final showdown. Other than that, I love all the other action set pieces, spectacle. Like we mentioned, there's a car and there's Gatling gun scenes. There's an airplane. A lot of high action in this one. Really great. You can definitely tell it had a good budget because there's some absolute spectacle put into the action scenes. Some more quieter scenes that I like as well were sort of the scene where Tony Masanti has a change of heart and he looks at the map of Mexico. I like the dialogue where he says, like, "Look at it, gringo. It's Mexico. I never knew it was so big." I do like that scene. More of a quieter scene. The scene where Jack Palance gets sort of what's the word I'm looking for? Humiliated. They tell him to strip down to his bare ass, pretty much, and he just walks off into the distance, and they show his naked body walking off into the distance. I thought that was a funny scene. Some other funny scenes, we mentioned Franco Nero using the matches on pretty much every surface he can find. He strikes the match between the woman's cleavage. He strikes a match between a guy's teeth. I mean, he gets very creative with his match striking. We had some fantastic scenes in this film. So those are just some of my favorite. I like the funny ones. I love the action scenes, but my favorite has got to be that final duel. So what do you think, Dan? What were some of your favorite scenes?
Yeah, I'll point out another two or three as you've mentioned them. So I do love kind of the introduction to kind of Franco Nero, where the guy's gambling and he makes him drink the milk and the dice. Whereas he holds his pistol up and tips the milk down. I think you've got to see it to understand what I mean. But then I do love the scene when they first come across the machine gun, and Paco doesn't know how to use it, and then Franco Nero does, and he said it's $200. He sets it up, and he don't know how to shoot it, and he looks at Polak and says, "Do you know how to shoot it? Yeah, but it's going to cost you $200 to shoot
Yeah,
it."
I
I just
got
think
it wrong.
that's when you kind of realise how much of an arsehole Franco Nero's Polak character is. And I also really like the scene of when they're kind of in, what would you call it, like the guest house, really, where Paco thinks that Colombia is going to go to bed with Franco Nero. He comes running
Yeah,
up the stairs and then he jumps out the window and all
yeah,
the
that
pig
fight
shit. I
scene.
think that's
Yeah,
great. And then you
yeah,
finally see Franco Nero's character get actually dirty in that scene, and I thought that was needed. Yeah, I'll leave it with them three. Let you go with some of yours, Carlos.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, straight off, the showdown scene in the bull ring is a memorable one, for another reason which we'll get into. Um, yeah, very similar to For a Few Dollars More. Again, me saying if you love the Sergio Leone spaghetti westerns, then this one is definitely a must. Um, I agree with what Dan said when the Colonel's army they come looking for Paco's gang, and they've he's arrived at the mine, which was his own property, and this time he's come there with force. And obviously, Paco's men are kind of fighting for their lives, really. And the machine gun gets used, which Paco has a real trouble kind of setting it up, and where Franco Nero's character is just kind of just watching, and obviously Paco can't set the gun off, and they kind of negotiate a deal while bullets are being fired and bombs are getting dropped. I thought that's quite a comical scene. But twice during that sort of gun battle, they were negotiating a deal where Vicenti's character, Paco's literally throwing hundreds of dollars at Sergei Kalowski to sort of help him get out of the situation. I think it was a fun scene, but at the same time, it's quite violent. I also like a few times where Paco's kind of he thinks he can go on his own, and each time he kind of fails. A few times he fails miserably, and then there's one scene where he's got Sergei kind of chained up and doesn't really
yeah,
want his services, and obviously the last shootout, then he realizes that the colonels and Curly are now approaching with extra firepower to bring them in, and then he's in real trouble after getting married with Colombia. Now he's in real sort of trouble in getting out of another sticky sort of position. He's again hiring the services of Franco Nero again. So yeah, some great scenes there in the mercenary for sure. I think next we'll talk about the Tarantino homage references that he used in several scenes in this movie into Tarantino's movies.
yeah.
Jeff and Dan, what you want to say about Tarantino using the certain scenes that he did?
Yeah, this was definitely a influential film for Tarantino in a lot of ways. I think even he has once, said his top 20 spaghetti westerns. This was one of them. So Tarantino clearly loves this film. But yeah, it's the sort of references that he has to this film. It starts all the way with the Kill Bill films, and it's in particular Kill Bill 2, where it uses the big piece of the soundtrack from this film for one of the pivotal scenes there. The scene where Uma Thurman as the bride is punching her way out the coffin when she's been buried alive by Michael Madsen's character. That music that plays there is from this film. So guys, if you're wondering what that piece of music was, it's from this. Um, also in Inglorious Bastards, that he uses a couple of the themes, the main theme from this as well. So yeah, this was definitely a highly influential film for Tarantino, and there's even a visual homage to this film, where I'm not going to spoil it too much. With in Django Unchained, with the Calvin Candy character played by Leonardo DiCaprio, there's a visual reference there we're seeing to this movie with Jack Palance and his character. So definitely an influential film for Tarantino. He clearly loves this film. So
Yeah, I do love Tarantino references. It always, even if I haven't seen a film he's referencing, I'll go back and watch it. It's funny because yesterday night, as you sort of browsing YouTube, I actually watched. I've been getting into Lady Snowblood and Shogun Assassin and seeing the references kind of Tarantino makes, and then kind of the references he makes to spaghetti westerns, and even down to the list that Kowalski's making in this. Which you've got to point out with the list when he's crossing it off in this film,
that's
it's just
another
such
one.
another really
Yeah.
cool scene. Yeah, I was gonna jump in, but I didn't want to interrupt you, Carlos. When they're negotiating about using the gun, how cool the character is. He's just like everyone's getting shot at him. He's just so cool. But yeah, my personal favourite reference is obviously in the final showdown. Tarantino uses in Django Unchained. Again, we can't say it because it spoil it. But everyone, if you've seen Django Unchained and then you watch this, The Mercenary, you will realise the reference. But yeah, I love Tarantino references, as we spoke about on another stream. I think it's
Yeah, we
paying
did.
great homage
Yeah.
to legends of the kind of film industry.
And just on a
Yeah.
personal note, for me, when I was a kid, I was a little bit older than a kid, but when I was a little bit, younger than I am now, I should say, when I watched the Tarantino films, some of them I watched before, spaghetti westerns like this one, for example, and I was like, hey, that music is cool, and I listened to the soundtrack from the Tarantino films, and then finally, after a few years, I watched, for example, this one, The Mercenary, and I was like, hey, that's the music from when Uma Thurman is, getting out of the coffin.
Yeah.
And I don't know. I just really love that when he does it. I really don't have anything against Tarantino's homages and stuff. He can do it a bit too much. Again, we talked about this on a different stream.
Yeah.
But overall, I never really had too much of a problem with the homages. So yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I've sort of have said on that Tarantino live stream that we did that sometimes Tarantino can overdo it. And even though he's used quite a few from this movie, I still enjoyed them. I really did. And it's quite obvious that Corbucci is one of his favourite directors. He's made a documentary about him and possibly going to be writing a book. But I thought he used them nicely in Tarantino's movies. The references they were kind of sort of like nods to this movie. I think probably he's used more from this movie than even Django, if in my opinion, or just as many. So there's definitely a big homage to Tarantino's movies. In this one, The Mercenary, directed by Sergio Corbucci. So, guys, I mean, how would you rate this movie? What are we rating them out of cowboy hats?
Yeah, cowboy hats. But I think there's one more thing we should talk about before we go into the final.
We need to
rating. We haven't talked about the big, sort of elephant in the room, which is the amazing score by Ennio Morricone, and of course we have a little clip to set that up as well. So let's quickly play that and then talk about it.
The music.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was actually going to say this feature will probably be under good points and bad points, if there's any about this movie. Jeff.
Yeah, I think the music definitely deserves a mention on its own for this one because it is the maestro. It is, in my opinion, the greatest composer who ever lived. It is Ennio Morricone, and for me, this is one of his all-time best scores. In particular, the track La Arena, which, as we mentioned, plays during the final showdown in this film. which is a fantastic piece of music. Oh, yeah, there we go. Carlos has the soundtrack for it. That's one of the few soundtracks of his that I still need to get on CD myself. I still need to get that. Yeah, absolutely fantastic soundtrack from the main theme, the sort of more of the Mexican, folk sort of music, whatever it is, whatever you want to describe it. Even to the whistling in this, I think is absolutely amazing. I try to replicate it or sort of redo the whistling, but it's impossible for me. I'm quite a good whistler, but I cannot whistle this main theme. But yeah, absolutely fantastic soundtrack for me. It's one of his greatest, and it should even be worth mentioning, or it should be said that this was in 1968, which was probably the busiest year for Morricone. He did, I think, 12 Western scores in this year alone. One of them is Once Upon a Time in the West. And the other one was Great Silence as well. Was this year? It was also 68. So it's quite a busy year for Morricone, and he still was able to deliver so many diverse scores for each of these westerns. I think it's a feat that really should be celebrated. So, yeah, great score. What do you think, Dan?
Yeah, so it says something when I go out my way to buy a CD soundtrack, but CD soundtracks I've bought in the last few years, all Ennio Morricone. It kind of annoys me a little bit when I talk to people who I call a bit more of a casual film fan when they say John Williams or Hans Zimmer, and they don't know who Ennio Morricone is. But I'm with you, Jeff. I do think he's the greatest. Whenever you see his name on the back cover, music by Ennio Morricone, you kind of know, well, at least the music's going to be very, very good. And he's got the knack of absolutely fitting the music to kind of every scene and every mood. For me, I just think it's incredible. The best for me.
Yeah, so I mean, the music, this kind of nicely leads into a section in this review or episode. Good points and bad points. The music is one of the good points of the movie. You've got some great Mexican sort of music, and you've got some great dual music. I also like Curly's theme every time he pops up. That's a little nice little tune that every time he pops up in every scene. But yeah, we've got to also remember that although Morricone takes the main credit for the soundtrack, it was actually also Bruno Nicolai as well. He also added
on this, yeah.
He also added into this soundtrack, and it's definitely up there with some of Morricone's best work in scores for me. So yeah, that's one of the good points. Also, for me, good points to the movie is a strong cast, which I think we could all agree on. Each actor and actress had a credible piece in the movie. I also like the action scenes. They are quite they have that more higher budget look to a spaghetti western. They're nicely done. Some of the machine gun scenes, and even the humor as well. It's not overdone. So I think you've got a good balance of sort of violence and sort of light-hearted comedy without being too silly, which a lot of the spaghetti westerns did, kind of more 1970s onwards. So for me, that is some of the good points of this movie, The Mercenary. So Jeff, if you could let me know some of your good points about this movie.
Good points. Well, I think you pretty much covered them all. I mean, it has a terrific cast for me. I love all these sort of main, characters and actors in this film and actresses. It has an amazing score. The cinematography, I think, is really great and epic, and it has an epic scale to it, as we talked about with the action scenes and stuff. I think. Maybe if there's a sort of bad point for it, because I'm going to talk a little bit about the bad points as well. Not that there are many, should be added, but I think it's the same sort of issue I had with the movie we talked about in the previous episode, The Magnificent Seven. I think it's the pacing. Sort of, it's a little slightly too long in certain scenes. could have been trimmed a bit, but that's really the only negative that I can really add for this film. Overall, I'm pretty much all positive on this one. There's not too many bad points for me. Pretty much just 95 to 99% of the film is all good points for me. It's like just a 1% of the pacing that drags it a bit down for me. But overall, I think it's just an excellent film. Plenty of good points. But yeah, the strongest one has got to be the great sort of group of actors, great cast, and the amazing music and the great scope of the film. So yeah.
I actually don't have a weak point for this film. So the first time I watched it, I thought, oh, Jack Palance could have been in it a bit more. Going into it again, I thought I knew what to expect. But I'm actually going to really differ from you on this one, Jeff, because a mental note I took on this is I actually think the pacing is really, really good in this for a film of like an hour 40 minutes. It flew by for me. And I was thinking at some parts, maybe it's quite fast paced. So for someone who's going in and don't want a Western to drag, just an easy watch, which is a great mix of action, humour, fantastic characters that really fit the role. The people playing them fit the role brilliantly. Even though there's far better spaghetti westerns, say a handful at least. I don't really have a negative to say about this. I've really enjoyed it this time. Originally, I didn't too much, but yeah, I just had such a great time this time around.
Yeah, to be fair, sorry, Carl. Yeah, to be fair, I should say that this is something I only noticed on this viewing. I mean, I've probably watched this film about 10 to 15 times or whatever. And it's only like on this most recent one that I sort of found it a bit dragging at some parts. So it might be just because of this viewing. I never really sort of had this criticism before. I should just add that. But yeah, overall, other than that, I do agree with you, Dan. In some parts, it just flies by, especially in the action scene and the set pieces and stuff. But I just want to have that said. Anyway, Carlos, carry on.
I don't have too many bad points. I mean, if they're only slight bad points. Jack Palance's character Curly could have been in it a little bit more for me. That's because I liked the character. I've never had an issue with the pacing. If anything, I would have wanted another 15, 20 minutes. But then that is maybe me, and maybe I'm being biased because I do like my westerns to be around the 2-hour mark. The only slight criticism is maybe that some of the twists and turns happened a little bit too often and too rapidly for my liking. Also, when Paco and Colombia, they kind of get married, and then just after they get married, you've got the army coming after them. So they could have added a little bit more on that for me. But like as Dan says, on the flip side, if you just kind of want a fast-moving hour and 45 minutes Western, this would be ideal because, there are a few out there that don't like the kind of 2 to 2.5 hours running time for a Western. So it worked for me either way. So that kind of would lead into our next bit, how we rate and rank this movie, Jeff.
Yeah, I should add, aka also known as the review roundup. I've called this segment. So
the review roundup,
in which we will give our final sort of thoughts and rating, indeed. So yeah, as we talked about, it's only on this recent viewing that I sort of felt in certain scenes, like get back into the action. I sort of felt some of the more dialogue scenes, I guess, this time around were a bit more dragging for me. But I do agree. Like I would have loved to have seen more of Jack Palance and Eduardo Friardo, sort of more of their more of the villains, because they did feel a bit. What's the word? Underused, I guess. But still, like I said, they played great parts nonetheless. But yeah, so overall, final thoughts. I think it's a excellent Western, an excellent spaghetti Western, an excellent film, to be fair. And I think like if anybody is trying to get into the genre or in this sort of subgenre of spaghetti westerns, it's one of the perfect places to start. Like if you've seen your Leones, if you've seen Django, I would say throw this in next. It's definitely one of the highlights of the genre. Tarantino has it in his top 20 spaghetti westerns. I have it in my top 20 spaghetti westerns, and it's my third favorite Koguchi film, right after The Great Silence and Django. So it's one of his all-time best for me. And yeah, I give this one for doing a rating of cowboy hats again. What am I going to give this? I'll probably give a 8 cowboy hats out of 10.
Dad?
Yeah, so me, just to sum up, again, if someone wants a faster paced spaghetti western, in my opinion, that has a good mix of action, a few unforced laughs like you get in some of the more sillier spaghetti westerns later on, with interesting characters, some good twists and turns which originally I didn't see coming, but I do kind of acknowledge that maybe they happen a bit too often, but they're still good. I think you would find it hard pushed to find a more enjoyable spaghetti western other than the usual kind of ones everyone mentions. Let's say the Great Silence, Dollars trilogy, Django, Once Upon a Time in the West. I would give this a solid 7 cowboy hats out of 10.
Okay, so I think we all enjoy Western. Yeah, I mean, I'll give it. It's a very good spaghetti Western. I actually probably would watch this one a little bit more than Django, which may surprise you because I think Django is a lot more darker and bleaker one with Franco Nero, and this one's a little bit more light-hearted. I like the gunplay in this as well. It looks a little bit more realistic, with the machine gun scenes, more so than the Django scenes. And obviously, the soundtrack for me is a lot better in this one than Django. But Django is a lot more of a popular one because of the main lead, the stranger who walks in dragging a coffin. But I will give this a very good rating of 8 cowboy hats out of 10. It's an essential one to watch if you want to get into spaghetti westerns. For me, you won't feel disappointed, and I think all three of us recommend this spaghetti western, The Mercenary.
Absolutely.
So I'm just going to talk about some of the releases briefly, then obviously I'll take it to Dan, and Dan can kind of discuss his choice, because what we're doing is obviously the first episode, The Magnificent Seven, was Jeff's choice, and this episode it was my choice of The Mercenary. So once I just briefly mention that, even though I got the 88 films release, you can pick this up.
I have the German one,
yeah. You can pick this up on the German release, which Jeff has got there, haven't you, Jeff?
Yeah,
the Italian,
which they call Mercenario, yeah.
With the Italian title, Mercenario, Koch Media.
Yeah.
That's the reverse art to the 88.
That's also the 88.
Yeah. I mean, Kino in America have.
Yeah, Kino has it in the US.
They have that cover, so it's a pretty affordable one to pick up on Blu-ray. There's quite a few releases.
Yeah, it's definitely available in multiple regions, territories. It's widely available. Yeah.
So that takes to Dan, and he's going to say his choice for our next episode on the Westerns for Life podcast.
Drum roll.
Yes.
Episode 3. Go on. Let's hear it.
So for episode 3 of the Westerns for Life podcast, I've gone for 1962's The Man Who Shot Liberty Valance, which stars John Wayne and James Stewart. Won't say too much about it now, but I'm really looking forward to talking about this classic American Western with 2 greats in it. Well, more than 2 greats. Lee Marvin as well. I think Lee Van Cleef as well.
Yeah,
Lee Van Cleef in the background. Yeah.
So, guys, I think that wraps it up for another episode of the Westerns for Life podcast. So, guys, stay tuned for episode 3 upcoming, which is going to be the man who shot Liberty Valance. Anything else to say, guys?
No, I think that's about it. Just thanks for watching, everyone, and stay tuned for the next one. Looking forward to the man who shot Liberty Valance, and that's it for this one. Adios, compañeros.
See you soon.
He sells death to the highest bidder. He'll sell your life for what he thinks it's worth. He is the mercenary. If you're not ready to buy, be ready to die. Mercenary. He aims for the money. His gun does the rest. Franco Nero, Tony Musante, Jack Palance, Giovanna Raleigh. The mercenary. The sun at his back, a gun at his side, a town at his mercy.